Yeah, hey, welcome back. We got a special treat, really, from for the afternoon session here of the Operations Committee. Dr. Stephen Enloe, and I was just looking through my emails to find a signature block, but he is a regular contributor to our DoD pest management community, and has given a number of of webinars on Phragmites and Tree of Heaven and glyphosate and some other uh, uh, herbicide-related issues of interest to our community. And for those of you who don't know, I put a plug in for him this morning during my ex officio in environmental biology update. That those webinars are posted on the board's website. If you go to our website and you go to the YouTube channel and you plug in videos, his previous presentations that he's given to the DoD community, geared toward the DoD community, is located on our YouTube channel. And we are once again super lucky to have Dr. Stephen Enloe. He's a professor down there at University of Florida, working on extension, and he's just terrific. And we thank him for being part of our community and supporting us. And so with that, I gotta turn it over to Stephen and with the great stuff that he shares with us. So thank you, Stephen, and I guess I'll let you share your slides from your end, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate that. Let me get this going here. Okay, let's see. So can you see the PowerPoint there?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be back this afternoon. Apologize, couldn't be there in person this year. I was up in Annapolis last week at the National Forum on Biological Control, and I just couldn't get another trip scheduled to Maryland. But Doug and Armando, I've been working with them for years now on a number of invasive plant issues across the country. And I'm very happy to be here and contribute. And they asked me to sort of give some updates on a number of different sort of a potpourri of topics here. So I sort of wanted to hit you with some things going on, some emerging issues, some work we're doing here in Florida that's applicable across the country, I think, and really leave time for a lot of Q&A. So that really one of the most important things that I have learned in my career in academia and extension has been feedback from my stakeholders is probably the most important knowledge I can gain. It's where the research questions come from, and it's really important to get that feedback. And so I have really enjoyed and appreciated a lot of the feedback I've gotten working with the Armed Forces Pest Management Board. And I look forward to the feedback even that I get from y'all after this. So you got me for 50 minutes here. I'm going to jump into this thing, and let me get my clicker going here to make sure we're going to work. Yeah, there we go. So Armando asked me to talk about glyphosate, this sort of this boogeyman that won't go away in terms of the issues we're facing there. Endangered species are an ever-present topic that is increasing in attention right now, especially with the EPA. And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. We're going to talk some glyphosate alternatives and some research we're doing there to tease things out. I'm going to show you some new educational resources we're developing, and then open it up for a Q&A. So this is, let's jump in here. Okay, let's get into glyphosate first. So I showed this slide last year at the meeting, but it's simply a sort of a nice visual on glyphosate use in this country. And it's a pretty phenomenal figure. And you can see that we are approaching almost 350 million pounds of glyphosate utilized. It looks like it's peaked a little bit and maybe coming back down a bit. But the bottom line is we have utilized glyphosate just in an incredible almost excessively in this country for many years now. What's interesting when you break down the statistics on it, though, for non-crop settings, it's about 2.1% of that total use. That's about 4.7 million acres where we're seeing glyphosate applied. You know, when we think about non-crop, rights of way, natural areas, aquatics, those types of situations. And I looked up the numbers on it, and it's still about 6 to 7 million pounds of glyphosate being applied in this country to non-crop areas. So the contribution that we make in terms of that loading of glyphosate in the environment is still substantial. And it's something that we have to take seriously and make sure that we are really up on our stewardship on. But if we go back a quick historical, a little bit of history here, it was back in 2015 when really the hubbub started with the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer coming out with their change from a possibly carcinogenic to probably carcinogenic, simply a switch from category 2B to 2A in their case. And this is a part of many chemicals that they have reviewed over the last 50 years, looking for carcinogenicity. Utilizing a hazard type approach, is harm possible? And unfortunately, what we saw following that very quickly was the lawsuits and a whole lot of advertising for exposure to glyphosate. You may be entitled to legal compensation. So we really started to see that explode. Now, I want to be clear, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. The IARC never classified glyphosate as a carcinogen. That would be a category 1 for them, where there is absolutely sufficient data to say this is a carcinogen. And glyphosate's not really close to that at this point. So over this entire period of time since 2015, the EPA disagrees with the IARC's ruling, their classification. The rest of the World Health Organization does too, the European Union, the European Food Safety Authority, Canada, just about every other country on the planet with a pesticide regulatory authority that has reviewed glyphosate has not come to the conclusion the IRC has. So I'm not saying it's them against the world, but in general, they really are standing largely alone regarding their classification of glyphosate as a carcinogen. Now, the EPA has taken this very seriously. And when California tried to use the IARC's reclassification for a Prop 65 label for Roundup or glyphosate type products, the EPA moved to stop them from doing that. And this went to court, was initially stopped, but California Office of Health Hazard and Safety Assessments, I may have gotten that acronym wrong, but they've moved forward. And so we'll get into that and exactly what they've done there. But the bottom line is the EPA has taken this very, very seriously and does not believe the data is sufficient to say that glyphosate is a carcinogen. Okay, now we have heard a lot on the news over the last few years, especially with lawsuits, with what has happened. And right now, I'm going to tell you the turmoil is far from over. It's a fundamental reality we're facing. We thought that the settlement that Bayer had agreed to was sort of just going to kind of make this go away. I think that company was hoping that was going to happen, but it's not happened. There have been 16 trials since 2018. 6 of those have gone in favor of the plaintiffs, and 10 have gone in favor of Bayer, formerly or Monsanto, which Bayer purchased, early on in this process. So it's been interesting. It's been a back and forth. We saw the plaintiffs win 3 in a row. We saw Bayer win 5 in a row. Then they lost several in a row, and now they're back and they've won the most recent. So it really seems to be where these trials are being held and exactly the judges, the juries that are present regarding the outcomes. But so far, there's been about $4.5 billion in compensatory and punitive damage awarded to the plaintiffs against Bayer in those 6 lawsuits that they have won. So financially, this has been a tremendous burden for the company. And I'm not here to defend them or say poor Bayer or anything like that. I'm just saying there's a reality that they're facing with glyphosate. And it won't go away because there have been over 165,000 claims made against Bayer based upon this. Now, they settled over 100,000 of those for about $9.6 billion, concluding that was a whole lot cheaper than trying to take 165,000 claims to court, with an average cost of about $3 million for a single court case. Do the numbers on that, and $10 million comes out pretty cheap. They have also agreed to voluntarily remove glyphosate from the U.S. residential lawn and garden Roundup market. Okay, so think of the box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, which you will go in there now and still see a huge section labeled Roundup. And what they're doing since 2023 is replacing glyphosate with a number of other active ingredients for those lawn and garden type products. The reality is there's a bunch of confusion with some of the things that they have put into those formulations. They've changed from systemic to contacts and really changed the context of what it means to use a product called Roundup from one of the box stores today. So from a regulatory status, we've seen this legal issues in terms of lawsuits, but where are we at regulatory wise? So let's do big picture first. Worldwide, you've probably heard the media talk about this, that several countries worldwide have banned glyphosate. And you'll get a number, and it's a huge number of countries that they say have banned glyphosate. The reality is there's been several countries who have announced attempted phase outs so that they would say we are ending glyphosate use in the next 5, 10, 20 years, okay? A number of those countries have even actually announced it and then backed off from a ban. So if you see a number thrown out there regarding a number of countries worldwide that have banned glyphosate, I will tell you it's probably a huge overestimate right now. There are some countries that have banned it, but overall, it is it's really some are in phase out, a bunch have backed off completely. Usually when a country announces something like this, there is massive lashback very quickly, and the countries have often sort of really stepped back from it. Here in the US, we have seen at least 150 different cities and county governments ban glyphosate use on public lands. So there's lots of where there's local autonomy to do this. We've seen it happen. This is not a political issue. This is not a red state, blue state thing. You can see that those occur across the country in general. Throughout much of the country, you can see these bans popping up. And so there has been, though, despite these bans, there's been no stop sale, okay, for glyphosate in the US and any place it has been banned. So this is simply the action of local governments that have taken this action to say we are no longer allowing our employees to use glyphosate on public lands or waters for that matter. And that's it. So it's not been banned or stop sale in any situation here in the US. And finally, the most important thing really for you to remember right now is the EPA has not mandated any glyphosate label changes associated with anything that has happened so far. They've reviewed the data, they re-reviewed the data, and they have concluded glyphosate is not likely to be a carcinogen. They recognize that if new data comes in, they are open to reclassifying. If there is really the needle starts to move on this massive corpus of data that's available for review. But to date, that's not changed. And there's not really been any new data that would move them in that direction, despite some of the things you may hear in the media. Now, back to this California Prop 65 thing, and I know there's probably a few folks from California on here right now, but when California attempted to put that cancer-causing label on Roundup or glyphosate products, it was initially blocked, but they really stuck with it, and they went back to the EPA, and they went back and forth a time or two, and basically the EPA did finally agree to this specific language, and I want to read this to you. Because this is what the EPA finally acknowledged, we're okay with this on the label. And that is using this product can expose you to glyphosate. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans, but the US EPA has determined it's not likely to be carcinogenic. Other authorities have made similar determinations. A wide variety of factors affect your potential risk, including the level and duration of exposure to the chemical. For more information, ways to reduce exposure, go to their website on Prop 65. So the EPA accepted that language. What was very interesting was a group immediately sued. And in 2023, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit found this language unconstitutional, saying that it was violating the First Amendment. And so that, again, has been I do believe that has been again shut down, or it should be on the way to being shut down. So, we'll see where this goes in California with this. I'm not sure if they're going to appeal it, exactly what's going to happen there. But again, the EPA sort of made some language adjustments for them, but the argument that the court ruled on had to do with the fact that they said the data does not fully support you making this statement, and forcing a manufacturer to put that type of label on a product without the data to back it up is unconstitutional, violating their First Amendment rights. Ooh, that was a mouthful. Okay. All right, so you look in the literature, the scientific literature, and you can find thousands and thousands of published papers on glyphosate. It goes up every year in terms of the number of new papers that are being published. And it's difficult to really digest all of that literature. It's almost impossible these days. And so I presented this, and I really want to go back to this quickly. The best thing you can do if you come across literature, if people share things with you that they are concerned about glyphosate or they read a paper. So some things you can immediately do is take the EPA's really simplified pesticide framework for glyphosate. So what we have is a graph here with the increasing risk on the y-axis there and increasing glyphosate concentration from parts per trillion all the way to parts per million from left to right, okay? So we have data that suggests glyphosate has negative impacts in ecosystems and organisms at extremely high concentrations. And that's been shown for some things. We definitely know it's a non-selective herbicide, and it can be very damaging to non-target plants that it is applied to. So there's a reality that that can occur. We also know that a lot of environmental monitoring over the last 10 to 15 years has detected glyphosate within a number of ecosystems and organisms, for that matter, where not that they're seeing bioaccumulation, but they're simply seeing the presence of glyphosate, say, in the blood plasma of specific organisms. And so we know glyphosate use patterns are definitely above those concentrations. Typically, we're in the parts per billion to low parts per million when we're using glyphosate. And so we would expect there to be some detection at lower concentrations than that. So the EPA understands these and they put this buffer in, okay? And this buffer is designed to protect non-target, unintended consequences of glyphosate use via putting a 100 to 1,000-fold safety factor on the concentrations allowable for use. So if we ever see that top right circle of glyphosate negative impacts start moving to the left, and it starts to approach glyphosate use patterns, that is where the EPA will absolutely immediately and quickly intervene to basically say, yeah, this is no longer working. We cannot accept the risk that glyphosate is imposing, and we're going to have to adjust the use patterns based upon that. Those adjustments could be anything from rate or concentration reductions all the way to complete and outright recall or elimination of its use entirely. The University of Florida came out very quickly after this IARC decision was made. And basically, we've made it clear in a one-page white paper that we are really committed to safety, especially for our people and our applicators. But we strongly stand on that foundation of integrated pest management as the first line of defense against weeds and other pests. And this can include the use of glyphosate and other pesticides. But we make it very clear that it's all about IPM and that we're not defending glyphosate, we're not defending the companies, but we are defending the science of the risk assessment the EPA utilizes and the science of IPM as our first line of defense against invasive plants and other pests. Okay, and that means using all reasonable options in concert to control pests where we can. Okay, so that's the background on glyphosate, and that's kind of where we're at. And if you have questions, stick them into the chat. Doug, is there any questions in the chat right now? I don't have that screen called up. But if there's any glyphosate questions right now, I can go ahead and handle them, or I can hold them to the end. What would you like to do?
Yeah, there's no questions in the chat, sir. I did have a question. Has any state banned the use of glyphosate yet?
So no, not that I know of, unless somebody has some new information for me. And that there's if anybody's going to do it, look to California and New York as sort of the cutting edge leaders on pesticide regulation issues. But if anybody's hearing rumors or seeing something like that being talked about, we definitely want to hear about it as quickly as possible so that we can start and make sure we're up to speed on those specific statewide situations. Okay, anything else?
I'll have a follow-up when you're done with this section, but yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
Have
Okay,
a question in the chat, just a minute.
sure.
It's just a comment. Several uses of glyphosate have been banned in Oregon recently.
Okay, so there you see a state taking action to start removing its approval of certain label uses. And Oregon has taken some action on some pretty swift action on some other pesticides too with regards to that. So that would be another state to watch out for on that. But not whole state bans at this point. Okay. Here we go. All right, so endangered species. So you've probably also been hearing a lot in the news about endangered species issues, and it's on social media, it's on a lot of scientific reporting, and there's tremendous concern about endangered species in this country, and rightfully so for a number of species that we are seeing declining populations across the country. Okay, so the EPA is really tasked with making sure that their pesticide approvals are not causing trouble in terms of endangered species issues. And they have been in court over and over and over for the last several years regarding endangered species issues, basically saying that the EPA is not doing its job, that they're not really fulfilling their mandate regarding endangered species. And so last year, I talked about the glyphosate biological evaluation that they had recently gone through. And within that biological evaluation, they concluded that glyphosate had the potential to harm about 97% of the endangered species within the country. And it was a huge number of organisms, over 1,500, I do believe. I have that slide in another presentation, but I didn't throw it in here. But the reality is they have been harshly criticized for not addressing that. So their next step was to write a biological opinion associated with exactly how they're going to address that. And what they've come to the conclusion on is they need more than just a glyphosate biological opinion right now, because the pressure is coming from the use of a number of different pesticides and herbicides for that matter. And so they're working on a new rollout of actions regarding the Endangered Species Act. It is in progress. And one of the things that you may start to hear about are called PULAs, pesticide use limitation areas. Okay. So this is a new strategy that the EPA is really working on to delineate specific areas where certain pesticides would not be allowed to be used based upon endangered species within those areas. Now, I will tell you right now, I have been in long conversations with my pesticide extension expert, Dr. Brett Boltmeyer, and he's working very closely on this issue. I told him I needed a couple of slides to sort of give DOD an update. He got back to me and said, I can't give you a couple of slides. He said, this issue right now is so complicated, it really requires us to sit down and have a good half hour to an hour conversation about this. And so I talked to Doug about it, and Doug is open to this, to a follow-up webinar with myself and Dr. Brett Boltmeyer, possibly Dr. Jay Farrell from the Pesticide Information Office here at UF, to really work through what the EPA is attempting to roll out over the next 4 to 5 months, okay? Because right now, they do have some information out. They are actively moving forward. It is causing tremendous confusion, and every time that they sort of delineate a new PULA, a million questions come up, and unintended consequences of such decisions are really causing them to readjust, reevaluate, and roll back. And so what I want to suggest is that we follow up on the endangered species aspects in a subsequent webinar if there's enough interest to really dig into this issue, because I cannot do it justice in a short time. Dr. Boltmeyer has been working very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers, and he feels like he has gotten the messaging together in a way that is really going to help them, because the reality of what they're doing right now may be the biggest change that we have seen since the requirement of pesticide licensing. Okay, so we're talking about something on orders of magnitude well above anything we've seen them do for over 50 years now, I would say. So that's a pretty huge jump. And it will potentially affect a tremendous acreage in this country, including some DoD lands. So having another webinar and starting to think about these things and prepare for them is something that the DoD, Armed Forces Pest Management Board folks really need to start considering. So I'm not going to get into a whole lot more detail than that, but this is something we definitely want to follow up on with some immense technical detail that can really help lay out the direction that you need to start thinking about in terms of future actions in response to what the EPA is going to be doing. Okay, that's really vague. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more information right now. But Dr. Boltmeyer said if you just give them a snippet of information, half the room will freak out and the other half will not know what to do with it. And it's just not an acceptable way to deliver that information right now. So stay tuned. If you want to be part of something like that, please reach out and let Doug know or put your comments in the chat here so we can get a number for a sort of a critical mass of bodies so we can get into a webinar to take time and go through that. Okay. All right.
Oh, hey, Stephen,
Yes.
Doug here. Hey, here's a comment really for you and for the rest of our DoD attendees at our ops committee meeting. And many of you have already thought about this, but many of you may not have. But, you know, one of the big changes that I foresee coming is as many of you know, that the monarch butterfly has been designated as warranted but precluded for listing as an endangered species, meaning that there's enough data to put it on the endangered species list, but they have another priority list of several species they need to get through before they get to monarchs. And monarchs are one of those animals that's pretty much on every installation in the United States, right? And so along with our natural resources community and the pest management community and some others, we're going to have to work with Fish and Wildlife Service for some kind of a programmatic Section 7 consultation for how to handle glyphosate and other herbicide applications for monarchs in the future. And that's a big conversation that we need to have in the future and it needs to be on everybody's radar. But and I'm sure you were thinking the same thing. And there's, I kind of have tunnel vision. I'm just thinking monarchs, but there's probably a whole lot of other ones out there as well that I'm not thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sheer number, they're dealing with about over 1,500 different organisms right now. So yes, and it's very geographically specific.
And by the way, it could be this year. I just got some recent email traffic that numbers of monarch in their typical hibernacula down there in the mountains of Mexico, I think it's at an all-time low of below 2 hectares of overwintering populations, and that's extremely low compared to historic numbers of 20 to 30 hectares in those areas down there. So they are really struggling this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Doug, I think that some of these rollouts, you're going to see them in the next 4 months, I would say. So, okay, so let's move on here. So to sort of finish up on the glyphosate thing, really, again, this is something that we are really encouraging folks, and it's time to do some soul searching with glyphosate. And again, I'm not saying don't use glyphosate. I don't mean that at all. But really, whether or not it's an option for you, is it time to review my IPM plan or your IPM plan? And so we tend to get into a groove, and we have contractors we work with, and they are often utilizing specific products, and they're doing that because they're comfortable with those. They've been effective. They've fulfilled contract standards. And so it's easy just to sort of push that to the back burner and not think about it and just say, well, the contractors got it down. They're doing what they need to be doing, but I would encourage you to spend some time with the contractors you're working with or in-house folks who are doing applications. Look at your IPM plans again, look at herbicide use, look at what you're actively going after and what the treatment strategies or the IPM strategies have become. Have they plateaued? Are you dependent on glyphosate still on things? So really dig into this, and I really strongly encourage you to lean into it. And I will suggest that if you really have questions and are wrestling with specific aspects of it, then reach out to myself. I'll be happy to do a consult with you, talk through management options for specific invasive plants. I've done this with a few different military installations across the country. I get up with Armando and we spend some time meeting with them, talking through everything we need to talk about regarding what the options are for invasive plant management. So I'm happy to do that for you. I feel like it definitely falls within, my mission in terms of working with DoD. All right. And again, are you taking your herbicide stewardship seriously? And finally, knowledge gaps. Okay. And this is something that I can't stress enough is where we need feedback from you. What are the knowledge gaps that need to be filled where we can be doing research that's going to help you improve specific IPM for invasive plants? And that is what we're here for. And I want to listen and I want to hear what you have to say regarding those knowledge gaps. When we think about glyphosate alternatives that we would be using to control invasive plants, again, I've showed this picture before of Bronchial life forms. It's just a whole lot of different growth forms that we see of invasive plants across the board, everything from woody plants to herbaceous that have meristems at different locations, from above ground growing points to the below ground growing points of rhizomes, stolons, tubers, corms, things like that. Aquatic plants even. The bottom line is for non-glyphosate herbicides, we often move to contacts. And contact herbicide efficacy is really dependent on a lot of these things. So if the meristems are protected, if those growing points are protected on a species, you're likely to see very localized short-term control of that species before recovery ensues. And that's going to be really important in considering alternatives to glyphosate based upon the biology of the species you're dealing with. And again, if you have questions, this is where I'd be happy to chat with you about specific species, talk through their biology, and really dig into what the reality is in terms of trying to control them with herbicides or with other options. What I see with glyphosate right now, a loss of it or a lack of the use of glyphosate is really probably the biggest issue for perennial grass and management, invasive grasses in general, especially perennials. We can utilize other herbicides completely. So we can take triclopyr for woody plant management, and we can pretty much eliminate the need for glyphosate for a lot of woody plants. And a lot of herbaceous stuff. We have other good options. But it's with the invasive perennial grasses where we often struggle and have a real lack of options. And it's across the board. I've listed several Florida specific, and then things like Phragmites, arundo, and reed canary grass as three other species often managed across the country. And so this is where you're likely to face some of your biggest challenges if glyphosate is off the table. Now, a herbicide I want to talk about, I'm going to give you a little text summary here and show you some research we're doing with this so that you can get some context for one of the alternatives for glyphosate for invasive grasses. So glufosinate, this is a pretty old herbicide. It's been around for quite a long time. It's got a similar name, and that should be glufosinate, not glufosinate. My apologies there, Glufosinate. Glufosinate, it was produced as a herbicide named Liberty. Many years ago for use in a number of cropping situations and for some early GMO work that was done. But it has a non-crop label. There's a number of generic products out there, such as Enloe and Cheetah, and there's a bunch. Okay, so the Enloe product, I just want to give you some examples from what you can expect from label statements. It's a lower formulation than glyphosate, 2.34 pounds active ingredient per gallon. Usually comparing that to a 3 to 5.4 pound per gallon formulation for most glyphosate products. Caution signal word that can vary for some glufosinate products. You need to be aware of that. PPE is generally straightforward of your standard base PPE, what I consider of long sleeve shirts, pants, shoes, socks, and chemical resistant gloves. Eye protection is not even listed on that label. I always encourage eye protection, but the label doesn't specify it. These products are not going to have, there's any aquatic label, so there are no glufosinates labeled for aquatic use. Okay, so we are talking about upland situations only. Glyphosate is a herbicide that's applied to the foliage. It has post-emergent activity only. So you're going to see no soil activity. It's very rapidly broken down by soil microbes, and you don't get any bang out of that. Use rates that we're going to be looking at are extremely low, 1 to 2 ounces per gallon, so 0.75 to 1.5% volume to volume solution. And so we're talking about with a lower formulation concentration and those low rates, putting out less herbicide than you would be using with a glyphosate product in general. Okay, so the interesting thing about it is it's mostly contact activity, non-selective, and very fast burn down. So kind of similar to Dicot. When you use this, you can expect to see brownout in just a few days if you've gotten good coverage over the foliage of the treated plants. So expect fast activity with glufosinate herbicide. So if contractors are using it, you can go out a week later and you will know without a doubt where they treated and where they didn't. All right, so Kogon grass, that's one of the invasive grasses I mentioned before, problematic across a lot of the southeastern United States now. Invasive warm season grass that is rhizomatous, produces viable seed up in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And you can see sort of a distribution is southeastern centric, but I expect to see this continue to spread across the southern tier states, and heck, it's all the way up into the Piedmont of North Carolina now in multiple patches. So, I expect that to continue northwards. There are genotypes of Kogon grass that actually grow as far north as Michigan. There was a rubra cultivar that was produced as called Japanese blood grass. That is an ornamental. It's been banned in several southern states, but it's not been banned in a lot of other states, I don't think. So that has been known to revert to the wild type Kogon grass. And so there's a chance you could see Kogon popping up in multiple states, very far from the mass infestation in the southeast. So we've used glufosinate. We've compared it against a number of different herbicides. And this is the type of activity you would see if an applicator is using glufosinate products on Kogon grass or a lot of other perennial grasses. 14 days out, you can see the treated plot on the right there, exceptional burn down, okay? And it's very fast. So the better coverage you get, the faster that's going to happen too. All right, here's a nice comparison of glufosinate against your standard Roundup treatment or glyphosate treatment on the left. And you can see glyphosate is much slower to work. 14 days out, it's really not even browned it. You see a lot of yellowing, but no brown out compared to the treated plot on the right with glufosinate. So this herbicide acts much faster than glyphosate, and and those signs of its treatment will be very noticeable very quickly. So I want to show you some data on sort of what this looks like over time if you opt to go with a glufosinate product on Kogon grass, okay? So there's a lot of data here. This is Kogon grass percent cover, so live green cover. So the higher those numbers are, the more abundant live biomass of Kogon is on the site. And then there's 4 treatments on the x-axis there: control, glyphosate, glufosinate, and imazapyr. On the controls, you can see over time, and the time stamp there is over 365 days from a late August, early September type treatment all the way out to the following year, 12 months after treatment. So this sort of encompasses, it goes into the fall, winter, spring, summer, and now all the way back to the late summer, early fall at the end of that 365 days. You can see glyphosate, and I'm going to use my arrow here. So this is your baseline, and then you can see 14 days, 30 days, and keeps going 60 days, 90 days into November. And then it sort of bottoms out there, and we start to see recovery into the spring and summer of the following year. This is very typical for what you would see with a lot of glyphosate applications on Kogon grass. And so it's why one shot of glyphosate is never enough, because we are getting significant recovery here. You can see the curve. Glufosinate, look at that massive cover initially, massive effect with that treatment, 14 days out, stays down for about 90 days before we begin to see recovery after that. It does not get back to the level of the untreated control in that 365 days, So it's really only about half of what we see in the untreated control plots. So interestingly enough, there's still some effect there, which suggests we are seeing some translocation with glufosinate that's going to be a bit meaningful, providing a little bit longer control. Now, compare that to imazapyr type products, which is your other grass herbicide or grass effective herbicide. Very slow to work up front, but once it finally starts working, 365 days out, and we have taken out 99% of the Kogon grass cover at that point. So bottom line here is glufosinate's got a place for some relatively short-term control that's somewhat meaningful even out to longer evaluations, which is really good to know. And I expect you're going to see this with a number of perennial grasses. There'll be some rapid burn down effects and some sort of control out for a few months, but the recovery will be inevitable. Now, what about tank mixes with this active material? What you can see is a glyphosate glufosinate tank mix. I put them together, and it's really antagonistic, basically. And you can see rapid recovery of the Kogon grass when putting these two things together, more so than glyphosate alone. So that contact activity of glufosinate really is shutting down the Roundup product from being as effective as it could be. Imazapyr, it's not the case. The residual activity of imazapyr keeps it down. So I've run into this on military installations that have required fast burn down. So like a Rundo, if you needed fast burn down, adding a glufosinate product in there will still get the control you're looking for with the rapid burn down. So this was really neat to see, and I'm really happy we're getting those results. And these are compared to the standard tank mix of glyphosate and imazapyr, again, which is what a lot of folks would also be using there. If you look below ground, biomass-wise of the rhizomes that it regrows from, this is a percent reduction of the rhizome biomass below ground. And what you can see is with glyphosate alone, 50%, killed about 35% of the rhizomes with the glufosinate, killed about 65% with the imazapyr, and then varied combinations here with better kill with those tank mixes too. But overall, bottom line is, yes, these treatments were having some negative impact on below ground, and it's really a good sign that we're headed in the right direction when you start to see rhizome biomass declining, especially a year after treatment. This is really important to get through, to really make sure you understand that with these perennial grasses, it's never a one-shot deal. There has to be follow-up treatments to really eventually completely take out the propagules, especially below ground, the root crowns, the rhizomes, stoloniferous type growing points. Okay, so to summarize it, not fantastic, but definitely some utility there, okay? Seeing a 40 to 80% reduction in herbicide use at those concentrations compared to glyphosate, which is a good thing. Fast foliar burn down, but still some reductions even 1 year out. No antagonism with the imazapyr, which means you can get that brown out without a lot of compromise on longer term control. Our next steps in this research is getting into repeated treatments so that we can see, is there a management plan that can put you on a good negative trajectory on Kogon grass that's actually going to get you where you want to be, which in that case is sort of completely eliminating that rhizome layer from a given patch to keep it from coming back so fast. Okay. I'm getting low on time here already. My gosh, it's been 40 minutes. I'm going to just blast through a couple of things. For woody species, we can really get rid of glyphosate or utilize triclopyr. We have 4 formulations now: amine, choline, acid, and ester, with cut stump, with hack and squirt type treatments, or basal bark with the acid and ester formulation. So we really do have good alternatives for low woody invasive plants for glyphosate. Here in Florida, things like Melaleuca, hard to kill. Triclopyr is not as great alone, and so we do this type of crazy girdling spray treatment with glyphosate imazapyr or cut stump glyphosate imazapyr treatments. We've asked the question, can we replace glyphosate with triclopyr? And the answer is yes. So 40% glyphosate, 10% imazapyr for that type of treatment. 540 days out gives us great defoliation. Switch the triclopyr out for glyphosate, 100% defoliation. Those trees are dead at 540 days. It's nice to see that. We can even cut that triclopyr down to 25% and get that same effect. So the bottom line is we are learning that triclopyr can be a good replacement for glyphosate where it's being tank mixed with partners like imazapyr. So, we're again building the database of where you can have good alternatives for glyphosate. With cut stumps, again, the exact same results. I'm not going to show you the data, but with both of these treatment types, spring and fall, they work the same. They were fantastic. And even with cutting 6 to 18-inch stump heights, the treatments were still effective on Melaleuca. So that means for high water situations, that cut stump option is going to be effective alternative for the glyphosate imazapyr treatment. So this is good, okay? So basically, just to summarize that, I just said it, it works. It's a good alternative. And I'll share these slides, so I'm going to move on here. Hack and squirt alternatives. I've talked about method herbicide in the past, aminocyclopyrachlor. Yes, it was just banned in Oregon completely, so you're not going to have it up there. This is one in the southern tier states where getting it into the phloem of the woody invasives in the south, and it will be effective. We've done a lot of work now where we're working on reducing concentrations of method with this approach, and we can get it down to 12.5% and still get some pretty phenomenal canopy defoliation. For species like earleaf acacia, Java plum, extremely effective at low concentrations. So bottom line, with this technique of reduced hack and squirt, we are killing just about every woody invasive tree we run across in Florida with this method, with this new approach. And so this is very promising, and it is becoming a game changer for a lot of woody invasive plant management in Florida. And I see some potential to expand it for species like Chinese tallow tree across the southeastern US, where it is very effective on that species. Okay. All right, so the issue with method always is conifer damage, though, and so that's where we stay away from it. No problem with oak trees, but definite with conifers, which is why it is not in Oregon due to some non-target damage they ran into. Okay, wrap it up here, new educational resources. All right, so Doug mentioned some of the videos we've been doing. They're on the Armed Forces Pest Management Board website. They should be, but we also have them housed on a new page at the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants website, and that's plants.ifas.ufl.edu. And it's under the resources under management guides. So what we're developing a series of YouTube videos. Let me see. We're developing a series of fact sheets. First, let me get to these 2-page front and back fact sheets, and these are basic herbicide recommendations for a number of different invasive plants in Florida. And so what these look like is basically identification, growth habit, distribution, a table of herbicide recommendations, a notes section for applicators to write notes. And then we have considerations in terms of some of the herbicide treatments, adjuvant considerations, seasonality of treatments, hydrologic considerations, non-target damage issues, and retreatment interval considerations. We've sort of turned this into the Cliffs Notes for these species, and these have been really beneficial to a lot of site managers here in Florida. And so this has been really promising. We've got about 12 of them done. We'll have 16 done in the next couple of months here. And we'll be up to about 30 by the end of by I would say December or early spring. So we're really putting this library together. It's very Florida centric, but what I want to say is I would encourage you to go to this website and look at these. And if you say, I want that for the species I'm dealing with outside of Florida, let me know. Okay, we can generate this type of educational materials for you, and it's not terrible to do. And so if you have species you would love this type of information for, let me know and we can put it together. All right, we have a series of YouTube videos. This is really cool. I've enjoyed building these, and I've got a bunch more I'm working on, where they are real deep dives on the technical aspects of individual plant treatments. So like basal bark applications, cut stump applications, and we cover the 6 T's: treatment, targets, treatments, tools, techniques, timing, and trouble. So we really deep dive on all those aspects to give you a solid foundational understanding of how these treatments work, how they need to be applied, and how to do it correctly with good stewardship so that your applicators don't get in trouble. I strongly encourage you to get onto our website and look at these, or go check them out on the Armed Forces Pest Management Board YouTube page. They're there too. We've got other video series like these coming out in the next few months, so be on the lookout for foliar type herbicide treatment training, reduced hack and squirt training, and then a number of species specific type trainings we'll be doing too with live videos. Okay, so the future content of this site is really predicated on your needs. Okay, tell me what you need. If it's outside of Florida, that's okay. All right. And so let me know and we will get these things up. All right, so bottom line from this talk, okay? We still have glyphosate, but if we do lose it, or if you're not going to be using it, you're going to see some substantial cost increases for essentially any other product. We see that across the board. It's the big issue is invasive grass control, where we have the least amount of tools in the box. We've shown glyphosate as a potential short-term option with some modest activity going out a year, which is good. We know triclopyr is a good replacement for glyphosate for a lot of woody species, or the reduced hack and squirt in southern states and cyclopyrachlor. Again, finally, we want your input on training materials, problems you're having. If you need a site consult, reach out to Doug or Armando. They'll get with me and we'll get it set up and we'll talk through what you're dealing with. With that, I'll stop, take any questions. Thank you.